What do you mean by this? Bait? No, this is not bait. This is... I have put time and effort into this. If you believe this is bait, I have such poor and sad news for you. If this makes you unsubscribe, good. Why Persona 5 Royal is poorly written, and why it could have probably been a lot worse than what it is now. As you can see, what is a persona? Most of you probably know what Persona is, but for those of you who don't know and are unfamiliar with the series, allow me to inform you about what Persona is. Persona is a problem with its community, mainly that most of them have only played 5, and that's a real shame, because there are a lot of really cool and interesting characters in Persona that kind of get looked over, as well as a whole bunch of false allegations about Persona 4 being boring, which is... I can't even believe that. There are a lot of cool characters like Chie Satonaka, Adachi, hey, even Akihiko, who's based. There are a lot of really cool characters in Persona. Now, let's not get it twisted. I want to cover exactly what I mean by what is poorly written plot-wise. And I'm going to take my opinion, as well as back it up with the opinions of someone who is a bit more well-practiced in writing, our good friend Haruhiko Araki, in his book Manga in Theory and Practice, where he outlines how he sets up plots and how he makes them convincing. If you don't agree with this, that's fine. This book is not the be-all end-all of what is a good plot, but it's the one I like the best, so you can suck my nuts. Now, what the fuck is a story? Really? What is it? Well, a story is made up of 4 main parts that's best illustrated with the diagram of a fish tank. Ooh, I got like similes and shit. The setting. The setting is like the glass of a fish tank. It should be clear, it should be concise, and it should contain everything that the story has to offer. All of the fish, all of the plants, all of the water must be contained within the setting. The setting is one of the more important parts, as it sort of grounds your series into something reasonable or understandable. Setting also includes stuff like power systems, rules, physical locations. All that stuff is included within the setting. The plot. The plot is the water that the fish and plants will swim around in. The plot is, in my opinion, probably close to the second or third most important thing in a story. If the water is murky, if it's inconsistent with what the fish need, the fish will die and then everything goes to shit. You're going to need really good water to take care of your fish. Now, the water should not dictate how fish swim. It should be still and resting and allowing the fish to explore. Because if the water turns into a river, the fish are forced along a certain path, and that's not great. The plot includes everything from motivations, third parties, inciting incident, so on and so forth. Characters. The characters are the fish. They're one of the main attractions that bring people to a fish tank. Fish are the characters, obviously. I don't have to explain what a character is. But you should know that the decorations of the fish tank should support the fish themselves. Much similarly, there needs to be a good balance between the decorations and the fish. Now, what are the decorations? They're the themes of the story. Themes should not overcrowd the fish and block them from view, as well as they should not murky the water and make it so fish aren't incredibly visible. All 4 of these parts come together to form an interesting and engaging story that combines thematic resonance, character arcs, so on and so forth. Now, you may be asking yourself, interesting, so if we were to break it down with a good story like Soul Eater. Now, the setting of Soul Eater is very well defined. Weapon Meisters have very clearly defined abilities. The active parties are all established with the DWMA, the Kishin, the Witch Coven, and the Medusa Sect. As well as the fun, the world is being fun, but not overly distracting and getting away of the characters. The characters are all fleshed out. The 7 main characters of Soul, Maka, Blackstar, Tsubaki, Death, Liz, and Patty all have their own unique character arcs, unique designs, and have opinions about the plot and how they engage with it. They are not mindless, and they are simply doing as the characters would do in a reasonable manner. The plot. Each character is clearly defined in their mini arcs. You know, Blackstar wants to kill God, Death wants to surpass his father, Mako wants to reestablish her family. As well as the overall plot. that being the Kishin is reviving, and each of the party wants to either use, seal, or ignore its power, and how each of those parties engage, as well as the thematic resonance of Soul Eater, that being the themes of family, tying them together in one cohesive plot without suffocating the characters and getting them left stranded. Other, smaller themes, like bravery, are woven into each character's individual arcs, and that is this. Persona 5 Royal fails on 3.5 out of 4 story points necessary for a well-written story, as outlined by manga and theory and practice by Hirohiko Araki. What did Persona 5 do well? Simple. Maruki is an interesting antagonist, I just believe he's in the wrong game. The Yusuke social link is one of my favorite social links from all of the Persona series, period. Yusuke is a really good character, and he shines out so much above the rest of the cast. The OST slaps. Most of this is due to Shoji Meguro, but I should mention that this music does apply a lot to the plot and stories and certain thematic resonances that I don't want to overlook. The character designs are good. Each of the Phantom Thieves is clearly illustrated with certain things that point out to certain aspects about their character, which I think is very cool. As well as they made Sai Nijima and Ichika Oya, 2 characters who I find extremely hot. Alright, wonderful. Glad we're on the same page here. Now, here's what I believe Persona 5 did poorly, and what I intend to cover in this stream. Here's how it goes. Basically this. The setting, while simple, fails to build upon the rules established by the other Persona games, as well as intercedes and ruins certain thematic elements throughout the story. Characters, while expressive and well-designed, are not convincing as co-workers, friends, or really even as allies. The plot is pointless in the base game, and in Royal it ruins the themes set up by base game of Persona 5. The themes, Vine Boom. I'm going to talk a lot about theming because I had to do math for this one. And why did they allow you to sleep with the doctor and the teacher in the exact same game? This isn't a Persona 5 issue. This is like just kind of an issue with media in general. Japan, why are we on this? Why are we on this? Let's talk about the setting. Are you guys ready for Persona lore? Whoa! All right. Allow me to introduce to you the story of Philemon versus Nyarlathotep. Now, Persona 1 and 2 is where these characters are introduced, but their themes have resonated throughout the rest of the Persona series, with the exception of Persona 5, which has a few problems here or there. Now, Philemon is the embodiment of all things that are good. He is the good god of the Persona universe. As such, he has a counterpart in Nyarlathotep, which is the embodiment of all things evil in all of the Persona games. Each game of Persona, they basically make a bet with each other on whether or not humanity will fall to their vices or will overcome them with the indomitable human spirit. And each game takes a different section of humanity to test them on whether or not they will abide by the rules of Philemon or Nyarlathotep. A pretty simple outline that all of the Persona games follow. Persona 3 was the advent of death, with the Philemon on the side of humanity will overcome death and will not live in fear of it, and Nyarlathotep that people will fall into apathy and decide to embrace death and do nothing with their lives. As such, Philemon and Nyarlathotep will both choose, I guess warriors is the best way of putting it, chosen heroes who will guide humanity on their quest to embrace life or death, truth or lies, social pressure, or self-independence in the case of Persona 2. I'm not incredibly familiar with Persona 1 because it's incredibly hard to get, and I can't be fucked. But Persona 2, 3, and 4 are mainly my aspect for Persona, as well as Persona 5. Now, allow me to get on. I don't like Akechi because he's bad. Joker is the wild card for Philemon, or the hero that he has chosen. He chose him because, well, why not? He was a young kid who decided to stand up against someone's oppression and good aspect of humanity. And as such, Philemon chose Joker, the main character of Persona 5, to be his embodiment, to guide humanity. Akechi, on the other hand, he doesn't really want... So the theme of Persona 5 is that people should reject abuses of power and, rebel where it is seen fit. Akechi doesn't really abide by those themes that Persona 5 set up, because for the most part, Akechi doesn't want people to abide by, those who are in power. He wants to do basically the exact same that Joker does. The only difference is he's a little beta boy and doesn't follow through. In fact, he kind of has a mental breakdown and dies in base game because of that. Royal changed this a little bit with Maruki, but we'll get to why Maruki has his own problems in terms of Persona 5. I believe Maruki is a well-written antagonist, but he kind of offsets the themes of Persona 5 to a degree that I'm not super good for. I think to best represent this, let's compare Akechi with other servants of Nyarlathotep. And those being our lovable lads here. Adachi, this guy, and also this guy. I'm forgetting their names because I'm really fucking bad with Japanese names. And if they're not written down, I'm super fucking bad. But let's go ahead and compare them. Adachi is the antagonist of Persona 4, specifically Persona 4 Golden as well. Adachi serves Nyarlathotep not in the way that you would think. The main wager that they presented themselves for Persona 4 essentially goes as follows. Will humanity choose to live a life that is full of lies, or will they embrace the truth of this world? Adachi chooses to live in a world of his own making, wanting to bring about the fog so that people can see whatever they want, and he can live in a perfect world where no one bothers him and he doesn't have to interact with people. He's a well-written foil to the main antagonist, as well as plays to the themes of Persona 4 that it's trying to present. Meanwhile, Ryoji, our lovable lad over here from Persona 3, is the embodiment of death and who will bring forth Nyx into the world. He's not going to stop. He doesn't care. Well, kind of, he does. He does feel pretty guilty about it. But ultimately, he still wants to bring about the death of all things, the Great Silence, because that's how he feels, and he believes it's truly correct. Killing him will only make them forget about Nyx entirely in the shadows. Death will still come for all of them. Ryoji is a good foil to someone like the main character of Persona 3, Makoto. As such, they're a good foil for each other and represent the themes of Persona 3. My main man here, the main antagonist of Persona 2, actually has Nyarlathotep as his persona. Interesting. I just thought that was cool. As such, he also represents the main themes of Persona 2. Persona 2 revolves around the ideas of social pressure inflicting itself upon you to a degree that you kind of just bend to it. This isn't the social pressure of like higher powers or stuff. It's more of the social pressure of people's perception around you. As such, the main character here this antagonist here kind of stays in the background, setting things off from the shadows, orchestrating things. Once again, another antagonist that contrasts against the main protagonist. Akechi's not great, but the plot isn't that great either, because the Phantom Thieves serve next to no purpose. Boom, boom. That's right, Vine Boom. I don't have a Vine Boom on me. Let me grab one real quick. Hold up. Let me grab a Vine Boom. I swear this will be worth it. Vine Boom. There it is. Oh, that wasn't nearly as loud enough. There we go. Now, you may be asking yourself, zero purpose? Mr. Old Reliable, haven't you played the game? Dumbass. Well, let's talk about what is the plot of the past 6 Persona games. You see, boiled down, each Persona game has the general plot of gods are betting on humanity to inflict a curse upon them, to see if they will overcome that problem. Each god chooses a representative and lets them see how it plays out without necessarily interacting. Persona 5 doesn't really do this. It kinda does, but not really. You see, Persona 5 has the general theme that gods are betting on humanity, and they release the threat of Yaldabaoth upon the world, to see if humanity will choose to break the chains of tyranny or accept them. Philemon chooses Joker, the young teen who has gone out of his way to stop an abuse of power, while Nyarl chooses Akechi, who is around and doesn't really do much or have much plot, I guess. The plot of Yaldabaoth takes up roughly 5% of actual storytelling in Persona 5. Now, you may say to yourself, actually, Old Reliable, the plot of Persona 5 isn't about Yaldabaoth, it's about a group of teens that decide to use their powers they are gifted to stop the abuses of power and fight the frontrunner of that being the Prime Minister who has orchestrated everything. Obviously. Now, this is the point where your PNG would fold their arms and say, obviously, but let's walk through this, really. Shido is a bad antagonist. As we walk through most of the palaces, they don't really have any ties to Shido directly. Kamoshida has no real tie to Shido. Madarame, no real tie to Shido. Kaneshiro, kinda. There's some ties with the Mafia that he was maybe paying them off, but ultimately, the main plot of Kaneshiro's palace was about Makoto and her story through Kaneshiro's palace. Futaba's palace does have a tie to Shido. However, it's more about the fact that he has knowledge about mementos and stole his mom's research than it is about necessarily, Shido doing something, really. Okumura does have a tie to Shido, but it's mostly just about Akechi and how he killed Haru's dad. There is, once again, another subplot about them being paid off by Shido that we learn later in Shido's palace, but for the most part, the ties are loose. Finally, we get to Sai Nijima's palace, which, once again, has no real tie to Shido directly. It just sets up the end game where Sai helps them get into Shido's palace so that they can, take it down. And finally, it's Shido's palace, where you fight Shido and then he dies and the story's over. Well, kind of, and then you get to the story about Yaldabaoth. For the most part, Yaldabaoth does not exist in the game as any major considerable threat, as opposed to someone like Shido, who technically is more around for, the later half of the game. But even then, the ties to them are so small that the only real way that you could defend Persona 5, plot-wise, is that you have to say that it's a character story about the main cast of Persona, and their endeavors through the themes of the story. Maruki's Palace, once again, I'll talk to later, because I think Maruki's Palace is really good. The problem is that kinda is in the wrong game. I want you all to reasonably answer me this. Why is anyone in the Phantom Thieves friends? I mean, really. They set up Haru's dad to be killed by Akechi, barely apologized for it, even though telling her the risk that they said, there is no chance that he'll die. Makoto doesn't really necessarily want to help the Phantom Thieves. I mean, she kind of does with people like Kaneshiro. Her main goal is to become a police officer and fight for justice in the world against people doing illegal activities. But after you get past someone like the next palace, we stray from the path of legality into the path of morality. Futaba, I could see being reasonably justified with the help that Joker provided. An and Ryuji, I think, could be considered pretty good friends towards Joker. Yusuke, while a little weaker, I can understand why he's working with the Phantom Thieves. Morgana is an asshat, and Akechi is just really sad to think about, because Akechi's not great until you get to Royal, and then once again we get to the problems of Royal. My main plot is this. The characters in Persona 5 are probably the most plot-driven, lackluster personality cast of main characters I've seen in recent memory. The only characters in the group I believe should be working together as friends are Joker, Ryuji, An, and Yusuke. What I mean by the plot-driven is that, for the most part, they kind of feel like they're getting dragged along by the story. None of them are actively wanting to be Phantom Thieves and save the world. They're all just kind of friends with Joker, I guess, and decide to tag along with him. The investment isn't incredibly there. By no personality, this may have been a little harsh, but I'll talk about it in a bit. Their social links in Persona 5, I think, are some of the weakest in the entire series. Not only that, but they also destroy the theme that Persona 5 sets up once again. Morgana is a bitch and always has been. They reduce them as a character, and they want you to feel bad for Morgana, but the problem is, you kind of don't, because they're a useless party member, so you don't have any real reason to, care about Morgana. Honestly, when Morgana left, you don't really notice Morgana left because they haven't been on your team since the first palace, I guess, until you get Yusuke. Futaba has borderline Stockholm Syndrome. The only reason she's really with the group is because she grows a codependency on Joker. Now, their social link does kind of iron that out and about her becoming her own person, but for the most part, it's really just codependency on Joker. Haru, we killed her dad. That is just, why is Haru around? We killed her dad. Makoto helped her once and barely. In the palace, Makoto doesn't necessarily need the Phantom Thieves. She really only needed them to open the door. And once she got in there, she picked up how to be a Phantom Thief by herself. She didn't need help overcoming her own, mask, was able to rip it off effectively. She just kind of does it herself without the need of the Phantom Thieves and is just on board, I guess, for killing God. And then a catchy skull emoji, because Akechi is once again a very sad character. Now, the themes. Ooh, I've been talking about themes this entire time. Each of the Persona games has a theme that is a main central point to the plot of the Persona games. Persona 2 focuses on rumors and social pressure. Persona 3 focuses on death and grief and how to overcome it. Persona 4 focuses on truth and our willingness to accept it. And Persona 5 is about rebellion? Rising up against abuses of power until it's about accepting truth and royal and then overcoming death with Kasumi and... Wait a minute, I've seen these themes before. Yeah, the problem with Persona 5 is that the theme that it sets up very early in the game, that people should rise against abuses of power, falls apart by the end game, where it's no longer about abuses of power they're fighting against. It's fighting against people who are trying to overcome death and people who are being moral with their power, theoretically speaking. The theme sort of trips over itself by the time you get to Royal. I think the theme itself of rebellion could be good through base game. The problem with Royal is that it takes the theme of Persona 4 and reapplies it into Persona 5. Maruki, I think, is an excellent Persona 4 villain, where he creates a world of false reality, a world where you're happy, the world of the fog. And, well, the investigation team covers that up and decides, to go past it. The problem is, Maruki isn't in Persona 4. He's in Persona 5. They had the correct villain of Shido, the ultimate powerhouse who's abusing his power, but since they didn't really tie him into the main game, they had Maruki, which, while well written, isn't a Persona 5 character. Now let's talk about social links. Social links are a really good way of representing the theme and tying each of the NPCs and main characters into the plot. Social links are probably one of my favorite aspects of the modern Persona games, Persona 3 onward. They're a great way to get a feeling for the world, dive deep into characters, and really get to understand them. In Persona 3, Akihiko grieves about the loss of his friend, while Akinari is about how he wants to leave the world and the memory he wants to give people as they die. In Persona 4, Naoto is about understanding that it's hard in some fields to work as a woman, but she's willing to prove that she's just as good, wanting to be a female detective. While Dojima accepts the truth that he hasn't been there for Nanako and needs to be a better father. I did some math. The social links in Persona 5 fucking suck. Out of the 22 social links, there are exactly 11 confidants who adhere to the theme of rebelling and overcoming the abuses of power. Now that's half. Not looking so great right now, Persona 5. You're kind of missing the ball here or there. It gets even worse when you decide, well, the main plot of Persona games is that a chosen hero is chosen to, well, influence humanity to guide them towards the path of Philemon. How many of these confidants do you play an active role in engaging with the theme of the story? In which case, you cut it in half again to 6. The problem with Persona 5 and many of its social links is that you don't play an active role in most of their characters. For the most part, you're kind of just standing by and listen to them talk about stuff that they were already planning on doing. I think the worst example of that is Makoto. I mean, the Makoto social link is pretty rough. For the most part, you're just kind of tagging along. Your inputs don't really matter much except for basically just flirting with her, and you don't really help her to choose a direction in the story. People's social links like Yusuke are very important. You talk through the problems that Yusuke is having, as well as giving him guidance and information and helping him come to certain realizations that maybe he can work for money, even if it, goes against what he believes art should be. The problem with Persona 5 ultimately is this. The themes it sets up are inconsistent. The characters it chose to represent do not adhere to the theme and often contradict themselves. The antagonists for Persona 5 are in the background and not necessarily super important, which means that there's nothing to fall back on when the character analysis begins to fail. The setting is a little muddy, as the main dynamic of Philemon and Nyarlathotep is mostly forgotten, and the one shining grace that people have for the game isn't really a Persona 5 ending. It's a Persona 4 ending. And as such, hopefully, I have represented why I believe that Persona 5 is poorly written. It could have been a lot worse. It could have been a genuinely bad game. But it's not. Persona 5 is a genuinely fun game. Its gameplay is probably one of the most fun in the entire series. The ability to combo off with your own team, the style, the music, all of it is a very good game. The problem is, the writing inside of that game leaves much to be desired. Anyways, hopefully you enjoyed my small little presentation. Any questions?